Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. On a sunny morning in Napa Valley, California, Alaric Thorne stands on the balcony of his luxury villa overlooking the vineyards. However, the serenity in this image is in stark contrast to the storm within him. Alaric's marriage is on the verge of collapse, and he doesn't even know yet that something worse is about to happen. Alaric has been married to his wife, Vivian, for 3 years. At first, their marriage seemed perfect, but as time went on, cracks began to show. Vivian quit her job after she got married and didn't seem too interested in housework. Despite the fact that Alaric hires maids and does most of the cooking, their relationship continues to grow distant. Alaric arrived home early that afternoon to find his driveway blocked by Vivian's sister Octavia's car. He had to park 3 houses away. Alaric and Octavia haven't been getting along very well, and that, combined with the fact that he and Vivian haven't been getting along too well lately, has made him feel a little irritable. As Alaric walks up to the living room door, he hears Vivian and Octavia talking. Just as he was about to enter, a conversation stopped him in his tracks. "Gosh, we did it 3 times today. Reese is a machine," Alaric heard Vivian say. Then Vivian continued, "Since Reese came back last month, I can't get enough." Alaric recognizes Reese as Vivian's ex-boyfriend who left her and moved away. "So what are you going to do now?" Octavia asked. "I'll get a lawyer and file for divorce," Vivian replied. "Reese wants me to move in with him. Since this is a community property state, I get half the property." Alaric felt a pang of numbness as he heard this. He finally understands why the intimacy between them has disappeared lately. Vivian is with someone else. Not only is his wife cheating on him, but she wants half of his property. To make matters worse, he realized that state law would likely support her request. Upon the death of his parents, Alaric inherited nearly $2.5 million. While this is a sizable amount of money, it doesn't particularly stand out in today's standards of wealth. He kept the money invested and never used it, despite Vivian's many attempts to convince him to spend it. On top of that, Alaric had saved an additional $100,000. However, his naive failure to sign a prenuptial agreement meant that Vivian could have taken nearly $1.5 million from him. Alaric quietly returns to the kitchen, grabs a beer, and heads back to his study. He begins to think about his situation and develops a plan to protect his assets. The next morning, Alaric called his broker and asked to liquidate all his investments, including his 401k account, even though he would face some penalties for doing so. By Thursday, he was ready to leave. Alaric tells Vivian that he needs to travel for a week to take care of urgent company business. He only packed 2 suitcases because he intended not to take anything else with him. All the things that were important to him had already been stored away because they didn't suit Vivian's taste. They had been renting a house, so there wasn't a lot of money invested in the house. Alaric has sold his apartment, and they have been searching for the perfect house, but none of them seemed to be suitable by Vivian's standards. Early Friday morning, Alaric left home for good. He gave Vivian one last kiss on the cheek, then put the suitcase in his Lexus and drove off without looking back. His first stop is to see his trusted friend, Ezra. There, he traded in Ezra's old 4x4 for his Lexus. Alaric revealed his plan to Ezra, who agreed to hide Alaric's car for the next 4 days. Alaric pays everything in cash because he has canceled all his credit cards to avoid leaving a paper trail. Most of his money is safely stored in an offshore account with a system set up to transfer funds as needed. He also keeps enough cash in the SUV for emergencies. Over the next few days, Alaric drove across several states. He stays in a motel every night, and these lonely nights give him time to think about his situation. He has loved Vivian sincerely, but now he realizes that Vivian may have never really loved him, but only used him as a financial support. Alaric blames himself for being stupid enough to marry Vivian. On the 5th day of his journey, Alaric arrived in a small town in Montana. He was sitting in a small restaurant when he overheard a conversation between an elderly couple. The couple is discussing their financial difficulties, saying they can't afford to hire help until the calves are ready to go public. And even then, The wages they can offer are too low to attract workers. Of the couple, the man appeared to be in his 50s and his hair had mostly turned gray, while his wife had striking red hair. After dinner, Alaric approached the couple's table and offered to help. He explained that all he needed was a place to stay, and he could work for them. The man's name is Cyrus, and he asks Alaric to come outside and talk to him alone. Cyrus is stocky and obviously used to physical labor. He questioned Alaric's motives, fearing that he might be evading the law or be a member of some organization trying to force him to sell his land. Alaric assures Cyrus that he is not a criminal, just a man trying to protect his rightful property as his unfaithful wife tries to take everything from him. He needs a place to stay, is willing to work in exchange for accommodation, and promises to leave if he is useless. After much deliberation, Cyrus warns Alaric that those who try to buy his land may cause trouble, but he agrees to give Alaric a chance. He inquired about Alaric's ranching experience, and Alaric admitted that he had some experience, but was not a seasoned cowboy. They shake hands and Cyrus introduces himself. Back at the restaurant, Alaric meets Isolde, Cyrus' wife. Isolde has a slight Irish accent, and both she and Cyrus are fit and attractive in appearance. Cyrus suggests that Alaric follow him to the ranch and stop on the way to the grocery store to get some clothes suitable for ranch work. Alaric thanked Cyrus for his thoughtfulness in buying enough gear for a week. After a 25-mile drive, they arrived at the Rockby Ranch. The place is well-maintained with a 2-story house, a barn, and several outbuildings. After helping unload the groceries, Cyrus took Alaric to the cabin where he would be staying. The cabin was simple but clean and contained a bed, a table, a wood stove, and a bathroom. It wasn't luxurious, but for Alaric, it was a safe haven from Vivian. As Alaric walks out of the cabin, Cyrus invites him into the pickup truck, ready to show him around the ranch. Cyrus owns nearly 6,000 acres, with 5,000 acres suitable for grazing and several hundred acres dedicated to winter forage. The back of the ranch is hilly and wooded and can only be accessed by horseback, with mountains visible in the distance. Cyrus used to have 3 full-time workers, but now it's down to Harlan, who has worked on the ranch for nearly 30 years. Cyrus hires extra help during the cattle pinning season. Cyrus dropped Alaric off at the cabin at 5 p.m. and mentioned that Alaric had wireless internet access. Alaric quickly packed his bags, set up his computer, and checked his email. Ezra told him that Vivian had reported him missing to the police, who were investigating. Ezra was the only one who knew Alaric was leaving, but even he didn't know where Alaric was headed. Just before 6 o'clock, Alaric sent his resignation letter to his old job without personally informing them. Then he walks towards the main house and Cyrus welcomes him in. Isolde is setting the table, and Cyrus introduces Alaric to Harlan, a strong man about Cyrus' age. They sat down to a nice dinner of pork chops, mashed potatoes, green beans, and homemade cookies. During the meal, Cyrus shared that the ranch has been passed down through generations, and he spoke fondly of his daughter, Saffron, who is working on her doctorate and will be home soon. After dinner, Alaric offers to help with the dishes, but Isolde declines. Cyrus reminded Alaric that breakfast is at 5:30 and work starts at 6 a.m. Before leaving, Alaric borrowed a copy of the front page of the New York Times from the counter. Later, he asked Harlan to take a picture of him holding a newspaper. Alaric emailed the photo to Ezra, asking him to forward it to the police, explaining that he had left voluntarily, hoping to avoid being listed as a missing person. Alaric slept well that night. The next morning he woke up early, had breakfast with Harlan, and then was assigned to go up the hill to replace the fence posts. Harlan took him to the barn, where he saddled a brown mare and loaded supplies on 2 mules. Cyrus gave him a Winchester rifle just in case, and off they went, following the creek toward the mountains. As they rode, Alaric and Harlan began to learn more about each other. Harlan tells of his past, when he got married right out of high school, but then found out his wife was with another man. In his rage, he almost beat the man to death. He served 5 years in prison, and when he got out, only Cyrus was willing to give him a job. The mountains looked spectacular in the morning sunshine, with snow covering the tops. After a half-hour ride, Harlan showed Alaric how to replace the fence post and then left Alaric to work alone. In this serene environment, Alaric found peace. He enjoys his lunch quietly, admiring the wildlife around him. By 4 p.m., Alaric had completed the replacement of most of the fence posts. On the way back, he found a tranquil pool with a waterfall next to it. Back at the barn, Harlan praised Alaric's work progress. After a nice steak dinner, Alaric went to bed exhausted. The next morning, although his body is sore from the previous day's work, Cyrus suggests that Alaric follow Harlan around the ranch. Alaric was impressed by Harlan's intimate knowledge of the land. They noticed that two of the calves were separated from their mothers and decided to go back and get their horses to deal with the situation. Cyrus had saddled the horses, and they managed to guide the calf back to the mother. That night they enjoyed another great dinner. Alaric felt energized and motivated to engage in the conversation and learn more about Isolde. Isolde's parents immigrated to the United States from Ireland when she was 5 years old. Her father had always been fascinated by stories of the American West, so he came to Montana, which explains why Isolde still speaks with a hint of an Irish accent, despite having grown up in the United States. Over time, Alaric adapted to life on the ranch. He found peace and belonging in his work and earned the trust of Cyrus and Isolde. Little did he know, however, that greater challenges and unexpected surprises awaited him. Over the next 2 months, Alaric took turns working with Harlan to repair the building, set more fence posts, and check on the cattle on horseback. This life has put him in the best physical shape he has ever been in. They developed a routine. Harlan had Saturdays off, Cyrus had Sundays off, and Alaric had Mondays off for laundry and chores. Alaric grew attached to everyone at the ranch. Harlan is easygoing and friendly, Cyrus is honest and hardworking, and Isolde is kind but with a hint of fire. They are an enviable couple. However, just as Alaric begins to settle into this new life, an unexpected announcement shatters the peace of the ranch. At breakfast one Friday, Isolde announced that her daughter Saffron would be coming home in a week, much to her and Cyrus' excitement. Later that day, Alaric rode through the wooded area to check on the cattle and then headed downstream along the creek. He came to the pool below the falls, dismounted, and washed his face and neck in the cool stream. Suddenly, he heard a horse neighing downstream and turned to see a horse and rider coming this way. At first, Alaric thinks it's Isolde, but he soon realizes it's a young woman and can only be Saffron. She had the same striking blue eyes and red hair as her mother. She rode to a halt a few feet from Alaric, her eyes lingering over Alaric's bare upper body, where the fruits of 2 months of hard work were on display. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" she asked in a commanding tone. "I'm Alaric and I work here," Alaric replied. "I don't believe it," she retorted. "My father says he can't afford to hire anyone else." As beautiful as Saffron is, her unfriendly tone is starting to annoy Alaric. "Yeah, I've heard that too," he said sarcastically. "And guess how much I laugh every time I get my paycheck?" Saffron glared at him, turned and spurred his horse away, quickly disappearing from sight. Alaric chuckles softly, puts on his shirt, remounts his horse, and continues toward the barn. Alaric later realized that Saffron's parents had misunderstood her arrival date. They had thought she wouldn't arrive until next week, but she actually arrived a few hours after Alaric left. She spent the morning and early afternoon with her parents before deciding to go horseback riding, something she didn't have time to do in school but enjoyed. As Alaric rounds the barn, he sees Saffron's red hair disappear inside. He dismounted and led his horse into the barn. Saffron must have been looking for her father and ended up finding him in the barn. Her voice came through clearly as she asked, "Who was that man at the waterfall?" After a few moments of contemplation, Cyrus replies, "That must be Alaric. He says he works here," Saffron said. "But the last time I was here, you told me you couldn't afford to hire anyone else." "He does work here," Cyrus replied, "and it's none of your business as to what he's paid. I'm still the owner of this ranch, ma'am." "Dad, he says you pay him so much money that he laughs every time he gets his paycheck," Saffron complained. By this time, Alaric had entered the barn. Saffron had his back turned and didn't see him, but Cyrus did, and a smile spread across his face. "Is that so, Alaric? If you think you're taking too much money, I can adjust it," Cyrus said. Saffron snaps around and glares at Alaric. Alaric takes off his hat, scratches his head, and says, "Well, I wouldn't want to take advantage of you, Cyrus. How much are you going to cut back?" Cyrus and Alaric burst out laughing while Saffron looks at them both in confusion, not understanding the joke. "Honey, let me explain," Cyrus said. "Alaric lives in the cabin next to Harlan." "And?" Saffron pursued. "That's it," Cyrus said. "Oh, and he gets to enjoy your mom's delicious cooking. So you're saying he's not getting paid? Why would he work without pay?" Saffron continued to question. "He has his reasons, and it shouldn't be up to me to explain them," Cyrus said. "Working for the chance to taste your mother's food is valuable," Alaric interjected. "And I don't think she'd like to hear it described as worthless." Saffron gives Alaric one last hard stare and leaves the barn in a rage. Cyrus shook his head and said, "She reminds me of her mom when she was younger. I used to think I could never tame Isolde." At dinner that night, Saffron joined them, sitting next to Harlan across from Alaric. When Alaric entered the kitchen, she gave him a hard stare. Once everyone was seated, Alaric decided to break the silence. "I heard from your mom that you just finished your Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree," Alaric says kindly. "Yes," Saffron replied briefly, without looking up. Alaric continued, "Harlan mentioned that there was only one veterinarian in the area and that it was 50 miles away. You're going to be a valuable resource to the people here." Hearing the compliment, Saffron looks up, her expression seeming to soften slightly. "That's right," Isolde said. "Dr. Harrison is the only vet here. He is always busy and often needs to be in more than one place at a time." "I agree with you, Alaric. Our Saffron will be a big help here." During the rest of the meal, Saffron chatted with her parents and Harlan, who had worked on the ranch before she was born. She didn't speak to Alaric directly, and Alaric stayed silent, knowing it was her time to catch up with her family. After eating, Alaric politely excused himself and returned to his cabin. He checked his email and found a message from Ezra. Ezra told him that he had spoken to his police friends and confirmed that they had dropped the missing persons case after receiving Alaric's photo in the mail. As for Vivian, Ezra said Brandon left her after he realized Alaric had taken all the money and disappeared. Unable to continue paying the rent on their old house, Vivian now lives in a rundown apartment and works as a waitress. Without the money to hire an attorney, she was unable to hold Alaric accountable. Alaric finds this ironic. Vivian married him for his money, and her new boyfriend is only interested in her because of the money. Over time, Alaric continued to work on the ranch, although the replacement of fence posts became less frequent. Moving to a flat area gave him access to a truck, which made the job easier. The morning after Saffron arrived, Alaric loaded his truck with fence posts and drove to the job site. When it was time for lunch, he realized he had forgotten his lunch. He decided to skip the meal and continue working until he heard a car approaching. It was Saffron, who drove one of the ranch trucks and brought him the lunch he'd left behind. After handing him his lunch bag, she stood and watched him eat. When she asks why he's here, Alaric jokes that he robbed a bank before admitting he was running away from a failed marriage. Saffron seemed to understand and left without further comment. Alaric thought about what Cyrus had said earlier, about Saffron being like a young Isolde, and he wondered if anyone could ever truly tame her fiery personality. Dinner that night was similar to the night before, with Saffron mostly talking to his parents and Harlan. Toward the end of the meal, however, a tall, handsome man appeared in the doorway. Saffron jumps up and down excitedly at the sight of him, calling out his name and giving him a warm hug. Apparently, they knew each other well and started chatting about what was going on. A few minutes later, there was another knock on the door and Cyrus returned with another handsome man, this time blonde. Saffron gave him an equally warm welcome. Cyrus once said that he had to drive away every man in town to win Isolde's heart, and the words suddenly came to Alaric's mind. Saffron is just as beautiful as her mother, at least on the outside. Alaric politely left the table and returned to his cabin. He mentally wished the newcomer good luck, along with a hint of jealousy. If Saffron really is anything like her mother, then whoever ends up winning her heart will be a very lucky man. And so Alaric began his new life on the ranch. Although there were some initial misunderstandings and friction with Saffron, he gradually adapted to the pace of life here and came to appreciate the place and its people. What he doesn't know is that fate is about to set him up for an unexpected twist that will completely change the trajectory of his life. As the days passed, Alaric gradually adapted to the rhythm of ranch life. However, underneath the calm surface there are dark currents. Saffron's arrival brought new energy to the ranch and a subtle change in Alaric's heart. One day, Alaric and Harlan were doing a routine check of the herd when they realized something was not right. It was still early, but they decided to go back for Cyrus, and then the three of them scrutinized the entire ranch together. Although the cattle were scattered all over the place, they agreed that there seemed to be a few cows missing. They decided to search the hilly terrain on horseback the next day. At dinner, they report this to Cyrus, who agrees to their plan. It rained that night, which complicated the tracking the next day. The next morning, they loaded the horses into the trailer and Cyrus drove them to one end of the ranch. Alaric rode a third of the wooded area, while Harlan continued up the other third. After that, they traversed the entire ranch, through hills and woods. After a full day of searching, they found 5 lost cows. When they emerged from the mound, Cyrus was already waiting for them. They loaded the horses back into the trailer and prepared to go home. It was agreed that the herd needed to be watched more vigilantly. It was at this time that an unexpected crisis came to the ranch. Late one night, Alaric was awakened by a sharp knock on his door. It's Harlan. His expression is serious and tense. Alaric, get up, Harlan said eagerly. Someone is stealing our cattle. Alaric quickly puts on his clothes, grabs his rifle and rushes out of the cabin after Harlan. In the moonlight, they saw several dark figures in the distance driving a herd of cattle toward the ranch boundary. We've got to stop them, Cyrus' voice came from behind. Having arrived on horseback, Alaric, you'll outflank them on the left, Harlan on the right. I'll stop them head-on. The three moved quickly. Alaric crept around to the left of the cattle rustlers, and by the light of the moon he got a good look at the face of one of the men. It was a man from the Wilson ranch. Wilson has always coveted Cyrus land, and it looks like he's decided to use such underhanded tactics to get his way. Just as the cattle rustlers were about to cross the border, Cyrus suddenly appeared in front of them. Stop, he shouted. You are committing a crime. Chaos then erupted. The cattle rustlers try to escape, but Alaric and Harlan are already flanking them. In the midst of all the chaos, Alaric notices that Saffron has arrived on horseback as well, and she is trying to stop a cattle rustler. Suddenly, a cattle rustler pulls out a gun and aims it at Saffron. Time seemed to stand still in that moment. Alaric wasted no time in charging forward. A flying lunge, knocking Saffron to the ground as bullets grazed the tops of their heads. Are you all right? Alaric asked with concern, his body still pressed against Saffron. Saffron looked at him with wide eyes, breathing heavily. I'm fine, she whispered. Thank you, Alaric. In this moment, something seemed to change between the two. But now was not the time to think about that. They quickly got up and continued to fight off the cattle rustlers. Eventually, under Cyrus' leadership, they managed to subdue all the cattle thieves and called the police to bring them to justice. The crisis not only saved the ranch from major losses, but also changed Alaric's standing in the hearts of the people. The next morning, when Alaric walked into the kitchen, the atmosphere was noticeably different. Cyrus patted him warmly on the back, Isolde gave him a warm hug, and even Harlan smiled approvingly at him. But the biggest change came from Saffron. She no longer looked at him with indifference or hostility, but with a new respect and curiosity. Alaric, Saffron spoke up suddenly over breakfast, I want to apologize for the way I treated you earlier. I misunderstood you, and I apologize. Alaric looked at her in surprise, then smiled and said, It's okay, Saffron. I understand how you felt at the time. From that day on, the relationship between Alaric and Saffron began to change subtly. They began to communicate more, and Saffron would often bring Alaric lunch while he was working, sometimes staying to chat. Over time, Alaric found himself more and more attracted to Saffron. Not only is she beautiful, but she is also smart and independent and passionate about animals. He admired her expertise as a veterinarian and enjoyed the occasional mischievous side she displayed. However, Alaric doesn't show his feelings. He remembers his failed marriage and doesn't want to risk ruining the peace he now enjoys. Besides, he thought a girl as brilliant as Saffron might not be interested in him. But fate seems to have other plans. One afternoon, Alaric was repairing the roof of the barn when Saffron came to him for help. "Alaric, can you take a look at my truck for me?" she asked. "It's making strange noises." Alaric gets off the roof and follows Saffron to her truck. As he leaned over to check the engine, he accidentally touched Saffron's hand. Both men froze at the unexpected touch and stared at each other for a second. Just then, a strong gust of wind suddenly came through and blew Saffron's hair. Alaric unconsciously reaches down and helps her tuck her hair behind her ear. His fingers gently grazed her cheek, and both of them felt the electricity of the moment. "Saffron, Alaric opens his mouth, but before he can finish his sentence, Saffron stands on his tiptoes and kisses him. The kiss came suddenly, yet it seemed like it was meant to be. When they parted, both were a little breathless. "I've been wanting to do this for a long time," Saffron said softly, a blush spreading across his face. Alaric looked into her eyes and said softly, "Me too." From that day on, Alaric and Saffron began their affair. Though they try to keep a low profile, nothing escapes Cyrus and Isolde on this small ranch. One night after dinner, Cyrus takes Alaric aside. "Alaric, I can see what's going on between you and Saffron," Cyrus said seriously, "and I'm just going to say this. If you hurt her, I'm going to make you regret it." Alaric looks Cyrus firmly in the eye and says, "Cyrus, I promise you that I will love Saffron with my life. She's the best girl I've ever met, and I wouldn't do anything to hurt her." Cyrus' expression softened, and he patted Alaric on the shoulder. "That's good, kid. I believe you." Over time, Alaric and Saffron's bond grew stronger. They worked together, laughed together, and had a great time together. Alaric found that he not only fell in love with Saffron, but also with the ranch and the way of life here. However, the happy days didn't last long. Wilson, though caught for cattle rustling, does not give up his ambition to get Cyrus land. He began to take advantage of legal loopholes and tried to take the ranch in other ways. Cyrus and his family are facing a great deal of stress and financial hardship. It was then that Alaric came up with a bold plan. "What if we could buy Wilson's land?" Alaric said to Saffron one night. Saffron looked at him in surprise. "But where are we going to get that kind of money?" Alaric took a deep breath and decided to tell Saffron his secret. "Actually, I have a deposit. It's an inheritance from my parents that I've never touched." Saffron listened to Alaric's story with understanding and love shining in her eyes. "You came here to escape that failed marriage," she said softly, "but you found a new home." Alaric nods and takes Saffron's hand. "Yes, I have found a true home and true love. Saffron, I want to use this money to protect our home. What do you think?" Saffron kissed Alaric excitedly. "I think this is a fantastic idea." The next day, Alaric and Saffron presented the plan to Cyrus and Isolde. At first, Cyrus is hesitant, but after seeing the determination in Alaric's eyes, he agrees. Over the next few weeks, Alaric began secret negotiations in an attempt to acquire Wilson's land. After tough negotiations, they finally succeeded. Wilson reluctantly agreed to sell his land, which Alaric bought with his inheritance. When all the formalities were completed, Alaric gave the deed to Cyrus. "This is a gift to you," he said, "as a thank you for giving me a home." Cyrus, the normally strong man, had tears in his eyes. He hugged Alaric tightly. "Son, you're family now." At this important moment, Alaric felt it was time to take the next step. One evening, he took Saffron to the place where they first kissed. In the glow of the setting sun, Alaric gets down on one knee and proposes to Saffron. "Saffron, will you marry me?" Alaric asked sincerely. "I want to run this ranch with you for the rest of our lives together." Saffron cried tears of joy and nodded his head vigorously. "Yes, I do." Their wedding was held at the ranch, and the whole neighborhood came out to celebrate. Alaric watched Saffron, dressed in a white wedding gown, walk toward him, his heart filled with gratitude and love. After the wedding, Alaric and Saffron began their new life together. They run the ranch together, with Saffron continuing her work as a veterinarian and Alaric running the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Their love story soon spread throughout the region and became a wonderful topic of conversation after tea. As time went on, the ranch flourished. Alaric and Saffron's efforts have made the ranch more prosperous. They have not only succeeded in their careers, but have also built happy families on this land. One morning, a year later, Saffron came to Alaric at breakfast with a mysterious smile. "Honey, I have a surprise for you," she whispered. Alaric looked at her curiously. "What surprise?" Saffron took Alaric's hand and placed it on his abdomen. "We're going to be parents." Alaric's eyes widen in surprise. Then he excitedly picks up Saffron and spins him around the kitchen. Their laughter and joy filled the room. Alaric's heart was filled with gratitude as he looked at Saffron's happy face. He remembered the confusion and pain he felt when he arrived here, not realizing that fate had given him such a wonderful gift. On the ranch, Alaric not only found true love, but also a sense of belonging and meaning in his life. Together, he and Saffron have created not only a successful business, but a loving family. As they stood at the top of the ranch's hill, looking out at the golden pastures and the cattle grazing leisurely in the setting sun, Alaric knew that he had finally found true inner peace and happiness. Here, it was his home, his future, his everything. As news of the pregnancy spread, the ranch was once again filled with joy and anticipation. Cyrus and Isolde are excited to start preparing for their upcoming grandchildren. Harlan couldn't hide the joy in his eyes, even though he kept his old cowboy composure on the outside. Alaric is busier than ever, not only taking care of Saffron, who has a growing baby bump, but also managing the growing ranch. But this busyness makes him feel incredibly fulfilled and happy. Every night, he speaks softly to Saffron's stomach, imagining what his future child will look like. "Do you think it's a boy or a girl?" Saffron asked softly one night as he lay in Alaric's arms. Alaric tenderly caresses her belly and smiles. "Whether it's a boy or a girl, I will love him or her. But," he paused, "if it's a girl, I want her to be as beautiful and smart as you are." Saffron turned and looked deep into Alaric's eyes. "If it's a boy, I hope he's as brave and kind as you are." Just as Saffron was 7 months pregnant, an unexpected challenge came to the ranch. A rare storm hit the entire region, causing severe flooding. While the ranch is on higher ground and was relatively unaffected, some of the smaller surrounding ranches were hit hard. Alaric and Cyrus immediately organized a rescue operation. They opened parts of the ranch to provide temporary shelter for neighbors who had lost their homes. Saffron, despite his mobility problems, insisted on getting involved and providing medical help to those affected by the disaster. During this crisis, the ranch has demonstrated a strong sense of cohesion and community responsibility. Alaric and Saffron have not only helped many people through difficult times, they have earned the respect and gratitude of an entire community. "You know," Cyrus said to Alaric one night, "I've never been prouder of this ranch than I am right now. You and Saffron are doing a great job." Alaric looked touchingly at his father-in-law. "It's all thanks to you and Isolde. You are the ones who taught us what true family and community are." Finally, one morning, Saffron went into labor. The whole ranch was in a tense and excited mood. After a long 10 hours, a loud cry broke the silence. "It's a girl," the doctor announced excitedly. Alaric's eyes blurred with tears as he looked at the tiny pink life in his arms. He leaned down and gently kissed a tired but happy Saffron. "Thank you, dear. She's too perfect." They named their daughter Aurora, which means dawn, and symbolizes new beginnings and hope. The birth of Aurora brought more joy and energy to Double C Ranch. The little girl inherits her mother's red hair and her father's blue eyes and becomes the most favored little princess on the ranch. Cyrus and Isolde spend most of their time caring for their granddaughter. And even Harlan teases little Aurora and makes her giggle when no one is looking. As Aurora grew, Alaric and Saffron began to rebalance their work and family lives. They decided to expand their ranching business and not only raise cattle, but also started growing organic vegetables and fruits. Saffron used her knowledge of veterinary medicine to begin researching more environmentally friendly and humane methods of raising livestock. Alaric is in charge of marketing and has built Double C Ranch into a locally recognized organic farm. Their products quickly earned word of mouth in nearby cities and even attracted the attention of some Michelin-starred restaurants. However, success has not made them forget their beginnings. Each year, the ranch hosts a large community gathering, inviting the neighborhood to come to the ranch for a picnic and to share their harvest. This event grew to become a local tradition and gave the Double C Ranch an increasingly important place in the community. 5 years later, the ranch has become a benchmark for the entire region. Alaric and Saffron have not only achieved great success in their careers, but more importantly, they have built a loving family. Aurora has grown into a spunky little girl who loves to follow her mom and dad around the ranch and is curious about all the animals. Sometimes Alaric would hold Aurora in his arms, stand on the highest hill on the ranch, and tell her stories about their family. "See that green meadow?" Alaric pointed off in the distance. "That's where Grandpa Cyrus started his business years ago. Now our family has made it bigger and better." Aurora's eyes widened as she marveled at the sight before her. "Wow, Daddy, our home is huge." Alaric smiled and kissed his daughter's forehead. "Yes, baby. It is not only our home, but also the home of many animals and plants. We need to take care of it and make it better." On Aurora's 6th birthday, Saffron had another surprise for the family. She was pregnant again. The news had the whole ranch buzzing again. "Great." Aurora jumped up and down excitedly. "I'm going to be a sister." Alaric hugged Saffron and Aurora tightly, his heart filled with gratitude and happiness. He remembered the confusion and despair he had felt when he had come to this land all those years ago with his injuries, not realizing that fate had rewarded him so richly. Looking at Saffron's gentle smile, Aurora's innocent eyes, and the familiarity of everything around him, Alaric knew that he had found the most precious treasures in his life: a true home, an everlasting love, and a place of his own. On their ranch, every sunrise is a new beginning and every sunset is a thanksgiving for the past. Together, Alaric and Saffron are creating not only a successful business, but a future filled with love and hope. As night fell and the entire ranch was bathed in warm moonlight, Alaric stood on the porch and looked around. The hills in the distance, the pastures close by, the warmth of our home behind us, and a sleeping Aurora in our arms. All of this gave him immense satisfaction. He whispered to himself, "This is what happiness looks like." Just then, Saffron walked out and took his arm tenderly. "What's on your mind?" she asked softly. Alaric turned and looked deep into his wife's eyes. "I'm thinking that I'm the luckiest man in the world." Saffron smiled slightly and leaned his head on his shoulder. "We all are." Alaric and Saffron stood embracing each other in the moonlight, quietly taking in the beauty before them. They know that no matter what challenges they may encounter in the future, if they work together, they will be able to create more miracles. The story of Alaric and Saffron continues on this land they love so much, and the saga of the Double C Ranch is just beginning. For months after Alaric settled in at the ranch, he pondered how to officially end his marriage to Vivian. Although he has started a new life, he understands that in order to truly move forward, he must properly deal with his past relationships. One evening when Saffron found Alaric sitting alone on the porch in deep thought, she gently walked over and sat down next to him. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "You look preoccupied." Alaric took a deep breath and turned to Saffron. "I was thinking about my marriage. I think it's time to officially end it." Saffron took his hand. "I understand. Do you need me to do anything?" Alaric looked at her gratefully. "Thank you, Saffron. Your support means everything to me. I think I need to contact my friend Ezra and ask him to help with some legal matters." The next day, Alaric called Ezra. He explained his situation and asked Ezra to act as an intermediary to contact Vivian. Ezra agreed to Alaric's request and began working on the divorce. He contacted Vivian and conveyed Alaric's wishes to her. At first, Vivian was uncooperative and insisted on a greater division of property. But when Ezra tells her that if she doesn't agree to Alaric's offer, she might not get anything, Vivian finally compromises. After weeks of negotiations, an agreement was reached. Alaric agreed to give Vivian a lump sum settlement in exchange for Vivian agreeing not to pursue Alaric and not to seek further property division. In order to finalize his divorce, Alaric had to leave the ranch briefly and return to Texas. The trip made him apprehensive, but Saffron's support gave him strength. "Don't worry," she said at the airport send-off. "We'll always be here when you get back." In Texas, Alaric met with his attorney and signed the necessary documents. The whole process had gone much smoother than he had expected. When the judge finally declared their marriage officially over, Alaric felt a great sense of relief. On the plane back to Montana, Alaric reflects on the events of the past few months. The pain and confusion of leaving Vivian, the joy of finding a new home on the ranch, and the happiness of meeting and falling in love with Saffron. He realized that this divorce was more than just an end to a failed relationship. It was a necessary step to start a new life. When Alaric returns to the ranch, Saffron, Cyrus, and Isolde are waiting for him. Seeing their smiling faces brought a wave of warmth to Alaric's heart. He knew that this was real family. That night, Alaric and Saffron sat on the porch and looked at the star-filled sky. "So it's all over?" Saffron asked softly. Alaric nods and gives a relieved smile. "Yes, it's all over. Now I can start a new life completely unattached." Saffron leaned on his shoulder. "I'm happy for you, Alaric. You deserve happiness." Alaric kissed Saffron gently on the forehead. "Thank you for always being there for me. With you, I know what real love is." From that day on, Alaric felt like he had finally let go of the baggage of the past completely. He can devote himself to the ranch and love Saffron with all his heart and no worries. The divorce experience has also made Alaric appreciate his life even more. He understands that true happiness is hard to come by and needs to be managed with care. He secretly vowed to always cherish his relationship with Saffron and the family that gave him a second chance. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.